Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Coop, the president of B2T Training, and I'm proud to have Barbara Von Halle with me today. We are going to take the next 30 minutes to introduce you or refresh you if you're familiar with it on the decision model and the new class that B2T Training and KPI are offering called Decision Modeling Essentials. I'm going to kick things off briefly talking about B2T Training and the new partnership that we entered with KPI, Barbara's company. And then Barbara is going to go through the decision model and the class itself, give you some highlights of the class. And then we're going to cap it off with a few questions. So if you do have questions along the way, we're going to hold questions till the end. But if you have questions along the way, please use your question box that is in the right menu option that you have with GoToWebinar. So type those in, and I'll monitor those throughout the 30 minutes, and then we'll get to some questions at the end. Let me start off by answering one question, or two maybe, that you'll have. Are the slides going to be available? Yes, we will make those available to you. We'll get out a message the first of next week. As well as the slides, we are recording today's session as well. So if you want to share this webinar with some colleagues, send it to your manager, some friends, whoever, maybe your spouse is interested, you can send a link to that recording as well. So the slides and webinar will be recorded. All right, so let's get started. All right, first, if you are tweeting today, I know we got a lot of folks out on Twitter, go ahead and use my handle and KPI's handle. At Coop is mine, at KPI USA is KPI's handle for Twitter, and also some hashtags that folks follow. BAOT is Business Analysis on Twitter, and TDM is the decision model. So go ahead and use those hashtags as you're tweeting the good stuff you're going to hear today. All right, so B2T Training, I just want to quickly go over a few slides about B2T. We are BA experts, and we're solely focused in the field of business analysis, and our main goal is to work with companies like yours and help you transform the way you're doing business analysis. Make sure that business analysis, your practice, is at its peak. So we started in 2000. The company was formed in 2000. Again, our single focus being business analysis. We know this area, this space, is very complex, so we wanted to make sure that we focus all of our attention, all the employees and contractors that we work with, their attention is focused on business analysis day in, day out. We have a full program to help with your transformation of business analysis, and that includes training, workshops, coaching, mentoring, and some consulting. And we offer certification. So for those that want to be certified, there's a number of courses that you can take and tests that you can take to become certified. And we are founding members of the IIBA. We've been involved with the IIBA right from the beginning. When it started, we had people on our team on the BOK committee, so helping write the BA BOK, and multiple people involved in chapters throughout the U.S. So I want to go into a little deeper about our program and what that includes. And I talked about training, some of the classes. We have a number of classes that we offer that cover the full scope of business analysis and the role of a BA. There's also, training is just a piece of that, though. You also need to focus your processes and make sure your BA processes that you have are optimized as well, so that the people that are trained can come in and really be effective on the ground. And then the structure piece is how are your BAs structured in your organization? Are they siloed on projects, or are they pooled in one group? How are they structured, and what makes sense for your team and your company in the BA structure? And then finally, we can help in the area of culture, right? I mean, the best laid plans are great. You can have training, your processes in place, your structure is in place, but then the culture is not ready to accept some of the good changes that are going to come forward with your BA practice. So getting the culture, getting your company ready for these new exciting changes is a big piece to making sure that happens. So, you know, a big piece for us here at B2T Training, throughout all of these pieces that we talk about, training, process, structure, and culture, we look to partner with thought leaders in the industry. So, and that's not just to bring in people internally as employees. We also have a number of independent consultants that we use to do our training and consulting. Those people are thought leaders in the industry. And then we look to, at a broader space, other companies that we can bring in intellectual property to help support all the things that we're trying to do. So at the end of last year, we started talking with Barbara Von Halle and her team about the decision model and how maybe we can be a training partner for them and support them, and we support their effort in getting the word out about the decision model. So it is my pleasure at the beginning of this year to kind of form this partnership and together build a training class around the decision model. It is my pleasure now to introduce you to Barbara so she can talk about the decision model and the class that we formed together. Barbara is an author of many books. Most recently, the book called The Decision Model. She's a co-author with Larry Goldberg. And she's kind of, her and Larry are the brains behind the decision model. So I'm going to pass it over to Barbara and let her kind of introduce herself and KPI and then go into the decision model. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Coop. I am very excited to be able to present the decision model with B2T today. This is a first in terms of partnerships in the training area, and we expect it to be a great experience for you folks and for us. Up until this time, we've been doing our own training, so B2T is a company that we trust to deliver the highest quality training for the material for the decision model. So I am really excited to be able to have created decision model training according to their format and offered through their training experience and the unique way that they deliver it. What I'd like to start with is the timeline on this page because it shows you how the decision model came to be. And I'm not going to explain everything on the page because there are a lot of things here, but just the most relevant parts to the decision model and to the training. The timeline begins in 1970 when I had the opportunity to work with DB2 before IBM announced it. It was probably one of the highlights of my career. During that time, I was fortunate enough to interface personally with Dr. Codd on many occasions. And if you know of Dr. Codd's reputation, he is and was and still is the inventor of the relational model. And so I have a book on the bottom here that I published in 1989. Handbook of Relational Database Design was one of the first books on relational technology. During the same years, Larry, he hails from South Africa, and he was building technology-based software companies on different continents, and so we didn't know each other at that time. In the next few years, KPI published 2 books on business rules, which you can see here on the time chart, and then Larry and I joined forces. And what was important about us joining forces was that I brought to the table the idea of a rigorous model and how to introduce a new model to the public, and Larry brought the practicality of software engineering and enterprise architecture to the picture. So we invented the decision model actually long before the book was published. We practiced it for about 4 years with selected clients under non-disclosure. And I don't know if any of our clients are on the line here, but we owe a lot to the first few clients who helped us improve the model to what it is today. And we published the decision model book in 2009, which is shown on this page. And as of 2011, Sapiens developed an enterprise-level software product called Decision, which supports decision model creation and testing and automation, so all the way through the life cycle. And most importantly today is we are very pleased that in 2012, we now can offer a decision modeling essentials course through B2T. And what this means to us is that outstanding decision model training is now available to all of you. We know that the training material is faithful to the decision model and the rigor behind it because we developed the materials. And we also know that the unique way that B2T does its training is really going to help people understand it quickly and hopefully adopt it in their organization. So on the next page then, that kind of brings you to our decision model book. And here, this is what the cover of the book looks like, and it is published by Taylor and Francis. And for those of you who are interested in it, the best price you can get it at is at Amazon.com. Believe it or not, that's where we buy it. We learned a lot about the rules of publishing. Amazon basically determines what the price is, so they can sometimes undersell the publisher. It's also available in Kindle form, if you would like. We were particularly honored when our manuscript and information about the model was sent to Dr. Ofer Etzion at IBM in Israel before we published the manuscript as a book. His title is Master Inventor, which is an impressive title. We have since been able to meet with him in person, and we were really honored when he endorsed the book and the model by saying, quote, "This can become one of the classic books of a new era in computing that will have much traction in the next few years." And he said this in 2009, or just before the end of 2009. Based on the current adoption rate of the decision model, he's probably correct. It actually has escalated and has become adopted by organizations that we don't even know, and they join us on our LinkedIn site and tell us all that they're doing with the decision model, so that's really exciting. Also, since the book's publication, if you're familiar with the OMG or Object Management Group, it is an IT standards group, and they have formed a new standards subcommittee that is dedicated to a general form of decision model notation. They decided to create this subcommittee as a result of the presentation we gave to them about 3 years ago. We are members of that group, and as are some of our clients. And so let me go to the next page, and let me start by explaining why we needed the decision model in the first place. So the title of this page is The Missing Piece. And the quote is from Ken Orr. For those of you who are familiar with Ken Orr, he's been in the industry for quite a long time and very active still. And he said, over time, major dimensions, meaning those that are part of systems and part of businesses, have been teased apart so they can be developed independently, which means we can change each dimension independent of the other. So, for example, how do we separate the data dimension from the process dimension, which I lived through that separation through the relational model. We're able to do that because we have one kind of model to represent process and a totally different model to represent data. We don't mix process and data in the same model anymore, although we used to. So today we have many different models for various aspects of systems and businesses. But sadly, we have left one dimension behind, and it happens to be perhaps the most important dimension. And that's because we have not been able to separate it. We didn't have a universal representation that belongs only to that dimension in order to really produce something that is totally independent of the other parts of a system or a business. And that's the business rules dimension. And I feel that I'm qualified to say that because I've been in the business rule world for many, many years, and I myself have struggled with it and written books about it, and finally came to realize that what we were missing was a universal theoretical representation that everybody could use. So let me go to the next page, and let me show you how organizations are dealing with the business rule dimension today. And have to be honest with you, this is exactly what I did up until about 6 years ago. This page, you can't read the process model on here, but that's okay. The reason is it's actually from a real client, and so we didn't want you to read all the details. But you sort of get an appreciation for the nature of this model. And it's actually, this one's pretty simple. But the client in this case had followed the best practices for separating business rules from process. And what that means is, like many organizations, they put identifiers in the model that pointed to business rules, because the idea is that business rules should not be buried in the process model. They should be separated someplace else. And so what happens is all those little pointers there are pointing to a business rule repository or a catalog, or sometimes people use requirements tool or a homegrown database. And so the business rules are not really in here, but this model is kind of looking a little bit cluttered. And it turns out that this way of separating business rules has flaws in it, such that no matter how hard we try, the business rules seem to become unmanageable in a very short time. So why is that? We have the business rules. They're listed in a catalog. They're in a Word document. They're in Excel. We don't have a universal way of grouping them or diagramming them. And we sometimes attach them one at a time, or we put them into groups. And the shortcoming of the groups was that they're driven by what a particular task and a process model needs. And therefore, our business rules and their groups don't serve the needs of more than one process model or more than one system. And this is certainly not as crisp as we as business analysts have been able to be with other parts of our system. And as a data person, I have to be honest with you. This is eerily similar to the way we managed data decades ago. we used to create a list of data elements in a data dictionary, and we would point to those data elements from process models, data flow diagrams, decomposition diagrams. But this turned out not to work too well for data either. And it was only when the relational model was introduced that it served and still serves as a superior way to manage data. Everybody works with relational models or relational model types. People understand how to use them, and we have technology that supports them. So we have to learn from this historic lesson, and Larry and I decided that we needed to rethink the problem. We needed not to fine-tune this way of separating business rules and logic, but to come up with a new model that is based only on the nature of business rules, just like the relational model is based only on the nature of data, and not to mix apples and oranges together. So the good news is on the next page, when we took this exact same process model at a client and we decided to introduce the notion of a decision model, this is how simple that exact same process model became. And that's because those octagons in there, they look like circles, but they're octagons. They actually point to a whole entire model, just like a task might point to a whole data model, a whole subset of a data model. So you can see the first thing that happens is the process models become simplified, and they consist of fewer tasks than we started with if we do the traditional business rules approach. So all the pointers to the business rules that you saw before are gone. So where do the business rules go if that's the case? So on the next page, you will see a partial process model. And the pale blue octagons, you see two of them, and those are what we call a decision model anchor. And what that means is that each of these tasks is powered by a decision model. Now, in this case, they might be two different decision models, or they could be the same decision model if we wanted to reuse the same model elsewhere. So the process model becomes simplified, and we simply have an anchor point that says there's a whole model here. So let's go take a look and see what that model looks like. So on the next page, you can follow the arrow from a pale blue octagon at the top, follow it to the right-hand side, and you'll see that it points to this decision model diagram that has the same blue octagon at the top of it. And below it, it has these green icons or green tablet shapes, and they appear to be related to each other because there are lines between them if you can see the lines. And we call this a decision model diagram, just like you have a data model diagram or a business process model diagram. And this particular one has five of those icons underneath it, and we call those rule families. I'll talk about those in a minute. So basically what we've done is we've created a model that might look to you like, it could look like a data model, it might look like an object model, it might look to you like a process decomposition, but it's not any of those, it's its own model. So let's go and see what happened to the business rules on the next page. If you now drill down from a rule family in one of the decision model in the middle, the arrows lead you to the two-dimensional table that you see here on the right-hand side, which is called rule family table. And it's not a common decision table. It looks like one, but it's more rigorous because it complies with 15 principles that are outlined in our book. And some of these principles define normalization rules for the logic, just like data normalization rules apply to data. So we break the business rule statements into their smallest pieces of logic, and we reorganize them based on those principles into these tables, and then these tables connect together. So you've seen that there are two visual aspects to a decision model. The first is the decision model diagram that you've seen, and the second is the rule family table. One of them shows you the structure of the conditions and conclusions only, which is the diagram, and the other one shows you the detailed rows. So you might imagine that you could start creating the structure without knowing all the rows, or you could start creating the rows and from there generate the structure. So here's what I want you to think about it. The most important idea is that we can now make changes to a decision model without making changes to the related process model. Think about that. We have really achieved total separation and independence of business rules and policy from the process model. It turns out there are lots more advantages. You can reuse entire decision models, as I've already mentioned. You can create a different view of a decision model. You can create a view for the state of Georgia. You can create a view for the state of Florida. You can create views for special customers. of the same decision. And so that becomes extremely productive and useful. So let me talk to you about how we actually go about in the requirements world starting to do our decision models. What I've done here, because this is common among a lot of people, is to use the Zachman framework because it addresses the 6 dimensions of a business or system. And what we are showing you here is that there's a natural home for decisions and decision models in the Zachman framework. So this is the row people use for scoping. And the first column is labeled the what column, and that's where our data things are. And so to scope data, we start with a list of data objects, data entities, or subjects. And the second column is the how column, and so we can start with a list of processes. But the good news is that we now have the why column, which is where you put business goals and strategy and rules, and that's where we start building a list of decisions. If we're looking at a process model, the kinds of decisions we expect to be in there, where those anchor points are, and then we can list a list of decisions for which we intend to build decision models, and that's part of our scoping. And so we can see if we have a lot of decision models or just a few. We can estimate the complexity and things like that when we're doing scoping. So on the next page, and I'm only going to go down one more row in the Zachman framework, the next page indicates the different kinds of models that you may be producing yourself. We have data models, process models, prototypes, etc. And the good news is that the decision model still has a very nice home in the Y column. But without the decision model, we didn't have a model to put in that cell. We had lists of business rules that were organized very loosely in non-universal manner, and it was kind of empty, that particular cell in the Zachman framework. And John Zachman has, by the way, contributed a chapter to our book. Think about for a moment the importance of the Y column as a business analyst. You already know that the what column represents data and information, and the how column represents processes. But what does the why column represent? It happens to be the last one we're developing, right? But the why column actually represents the intellectual thinking and reasoning behind decisions that are sitting in your processes or your actual business. So as a decision modeler, you often find yourself guiding business people in thinking about the decision they are trying to model, whether to pay a claim or whether to accept a mortgage application. They start to think about the potential that decision has on the business performance itself, and they start to become creative about the conditions and conclusions that should be relevant and what they should be talking about and evaluating in order to make a high-quality decision. And when you start doing that, the decision model truly elevates the role of business rules in an organization. They become part of a much bigger picture, where the bigger picture is the model of the decisions that are guiding the business, and you tend to get higher-level management support. So on the next page, we show you some of the models that you might be delivering, and we've simply added the decision model as one of them. And, of course, we put it right in the middle of the diagram, but you don't have to put it in the center. So you'll create process models, data models, etc. And the decision model has connection points to other models. You've already seen that it operates within a process, so it has a connection to process. It references data from databases, so it has a connection to data. It also has a very strong connection to business objectives, because we can actually sometimes tie tangible, measurable return on investment to each decision model. How much money is it supposed to save the organization, or how many fines is it supposed to alleviate so that you're in compliance with regulations? So decision models are very closely related to business motivation. So I hope you're beginning to understand that the decision model is its own model. It's not just a set of annotations on other kinds of models. And it also fills a gap that we have had for a very long time. And one of our clients recently told us that the decision model solves a problem that they thought was unsolvable. So let me just wrap up with a couple of slides here. Organizations around the world are quickly adopting the decision model as a standard requirements deliverable with great success, and I'm going to share one success story with you. The reason we believe is for the success is its rigor and its simplicity. So think about this for a moment. Given a set of input statements to a business analyst, there's only one way to organize the logic in those statements in a decision model. What does that mean? It means everyone will produce the same or similar decision models given the same input. When you get that kind of predictability in the look and feel, it makes decision models easy to interpret and easy to validate. And so this page lists the 5 benefits that other companies have already achieved from delivering and automating decision models. The first is that the decision model delivers one representation for business rules and logic that is easily understood by both business and IT audiences. There's nothing technical in the decision model. The second is that because decision models are simple to change, we find that business people become very active in governance over the models and in suggesting changes and playing with the changes in them to see how much better the decisions would be made. The third one is that it turns out, to our surprise, that the decision models are easier to automate in today's technology than we anticipated. And that's because many organizations are using business rule engines or business rule management systems such as Blaze and iLog, Jules, and clients have automated decision models in all of those technologies. In fact, some of them have automated the same decision model in multiple technologies to see which one it works best in. But it always works and it always gives you the right answer if you do the logic right. The fourth reason is very important to us. We have tried various approaches, and we've even written a book about one of them. But we have found that the decision model is the fastest way, faster than any other approach in our experience today. It does not require you to translate business statements into special grammar or templates and then into technical language. So it's sort of a fast path, and everybody can understand the diagram. And the fifth advantage is that due to its simplicity, the decision model representation is not only easy and quick to change, but it's easier and quicker to validate against errors and even to test because it's a visual representation. And people find errors in the logic before we ever turn it over to IT. And actually that error finding capability is now automated in software where you can actually push a button and it'll tell you all of the errors in your decision model. Even we've done it with models that have 100 rule families in them, and that's really very nice. So let me share the one success story with you, and then I'll just introduce you to the course. So on the next page here, this represents a project at a very large manufacturer of technology, and their challenge was their purchasing and contracting process and system because it was very complex due to improvements, right? So like most such systems, it was not understood by business people. Inconsistency existed among global locations, and it took a lot of heroic efforts to make things work. So we decided to suggest that we introduce the decision model, which was a novel idea. It was something new. They didn't know about it, and they had not tried it before. And their quote, the client lead at the end was, "This was a spectacular success." So let me just tell you what we were able to do. We were able to simplify the process models because we introduced the decision model. We could visually uncover errors or differences in logic from one location to another because we would do the logic as it was in one geographical location and do it in another and compare visually the two models. We actually were able to do all of this in 2/3 of the time we thought it would take us. Sometimes this is a common experience. It takes us less time, but that's not, of course, always guaranteed, but it does seem to go fast. So let me just talk about the deliverables real quickly. Our first deliverable, as always, was to attack those complicated process models. We simplified the process models. We identified 8 decision models. When we modeled them, we had 81 rule families, and it took us only 8 weeks to populate them and validate them and test them. And so that just gives you an idea of magnitude. They are, very self-contained type of things. The challenges were interesting because this particular project was globally distributed, and the team was very skeptical. They did not think that the decision model was going to be part of the solution, but obviously we fit into the tight project timelines and limited budgets. So let me go on to two pages on the course. This is the course outline. It begins with an introduction including benefits for your company and the simplification of business process models and a full explanation of the decision model diagram. And then the second section introduces you to all the concepts of the decision model with 5 exercises to reinforce every single part of it. And then the remaining sections actually walk through a somewhat realistic case study from start to finish, so you'll be able to see what something might look like in a real project environment. And then finally, I'd like to wrap up with the decision modeling essentials on the next page, what you will be able to do when you complete this course. And let me just mention one thing. The Decision Modeling Essentials course is an extension to our book in 2 ways. It provides more details, and it walks you through the interactive classroom exercises that are so characteristic of B2T training. So when you're finishing this course, you will be able to do the following. Explain the benefits of decision models to both business and technical audiences. You will understand how to simplify business process models. You'll be able to discuss how the decision model is different from other business rule approaches. You'll be able to build and populate them. You'll be able to understand how to conduct validation sessions with decision models. You will recognize the kinds of decisions in different industries that are most appropriate for decision models, and then you'll be able to conduct decision modeling sessions both with business and IT in an iterative fashion. It lends itself very much to agile and iterative development. So I hope if you're not familiar with the decision model that you found this interesting and innovative, and I really hope to see some of you in the upcoming decision modeling essential class that B2T will be offering. And I'll turn it over to Coop.
All right. Thanks, Barb. That was great. I mean, great overview, and I hope everybody found that valuable. I will say there were a number of questions, but we are out of time, so I'm going to what I'm going to do with the questions is have Barb and I look over those and get back to everybody kind of that registered with all the questions. So the questions that came in, and we'll respond. So with three things, the questions answered, the slide deck, as well as a link to the recording. So we will get that out to everybody. But I want to say on behalf of B2T Training and KPI, thank you guys very much. The first class or the upcoming class that we have to offer is April 10th here in Atlanta. So if you guys are interested, go to the B2T Training site and register. Thank you guys very much, and have a great afternoon.